So if you look at this map, okay, I'm going to be on the shadow there.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but anyway, so if you look over here, this is Rabbit Lake, right here. So there's Lake Temagami, and there's all those little lakes I was telling you about. Snake Lake. This is what after it was. So this is Rabbit Lake. Wabus Name WC. Yeah, so it's Rabbit Lake, Sitting Rabbit, I think it is. So now this is down here on the South Bay, which is right in here now. I think I know that's for one of the scenes I recognized, and the Matabichuan Lodge would have been up in here. So here's the where the river goes into Lake Temiskaming, you see?
Oh, yes.
So, rabbit chutes. It provided income in the winter time, because don't forget, at that time in the 20s when the film was made, I guess mid to late 20s, that it was people were still trapping, and some people were living at the Hudson's Bay at Bear Island, and where the Hudson's Bay store was, and so there was the barter credit system, and so, and they were always short of cash, short of money, and life was hard, and they were getting squeezed off the land too, where they wouldn't have there were persecutions for hunting and trapping and fishing, even against Native people for doing those, making a living without a permit. And so that kind of forced some people to become more dependent on the money system, So, and then there at that time too, tourism was actually there were a lot of fishing and hunting, but mostly fishing, taking tourists, fishermen, and guiding for them. So there was income. That would be like the summer income. That would be working in these camps, or working for the man, so to speak. And so that's how so this would be winter income. In fact, one of the things that the Temagami people did back in I forget what years those would have been, but also in the 20s, I think. Another thing they did was to go to, they had a exhibition hockey teams, where they went as a novelty. The warring Crees against the fierce Ojibways, or something like that. So there were two all native teams, and they wore headdresses and fringed shirts for playing, and they were all very natural athletes and great hockey players. And so they traveled. They had a touring bus, kind of like the Harlem Globetrotters, and that was an idea that one of the men had for how they could make money, because their life was changing. And so that was something. So this whole notion of getting paid, like tourism, and that tour.
Would that have been before or in the 20s?
Yeah, my grandfather probably was in his teens when he played in that team, and my mom wasn't born until 1930, so definitely would have been in the early 20s, 20, maybe 23, kind of thinking about it. But there's some photographs of it. So the whole notion of the film would have brought income to people who didn't have a lot of money, and things were starting to depend more on money because of being dispossessed and being forced off the land. When the government was licensing non-native people on that territory, and they were especially in the 30s and 40s, it became really bad, like where people lost their income, basically trapping and trading with the Hudson's Bay Company. And I'm sure it would have been fun entertaining, and the work, and the just the livelihood. And I know that Madeline herself, who was the coordinator for the all the costuming for the film, she coordinated it, all the women to make those costumes. She I know that she was the competence, and she was quite young. I think she was 22 or so when that was being made, and so she talked about and I coordinated all the costumes, so it was like a learning experience for her, where she got to use her quite her skills, and also her incredible brilliance. I mean, she was a very brilliant person.
Yeah, the film doesn't look the way it does without that kind of knowledge and skill.
Yeah. Yeah, and whether or not they were and so in the canoes, some of the artifacts, and I'm not really sure how accurate the costuming is, even I know it's authentically made and from the same materials, but I was wondering when I was looking at it if there was some sort of preconceived notion about what these should look like that was put into it, but they seem to be really authentic, like that white blanket, that rabbit skin, that was a real thing. And I think it was
the snowshoes.
Yeah. So that I forget how that joke goes now. I think I don't know if Madeline told me or not, but about rabbit skin blanket, having a brown rabbit skin blanket and turns white in the winter. But anyway.
Well, that's handy.
Yeah, so the snowshoes, I think, they're culturally accurate, the canoes, because Temagami and Algonquin, like Temiskaming canoes, are very similar. The Algonquin and the Temagami ones, very, very similar, except there's some difference in the bow, apparently. And I think the Temagami canoe is a little bit straighter up on the bow. In the notion of domesticating bear cubs, I don't think that the domestication of wild animals and the whole notion of being nomadic, that was another thing, because in this area here, which is the homeland territory of the Timiagama and Anishinaabe, the stories that they have are from 7,000 years ago. These are stories that are set in time that describe geological the glacier, and describe stories and actually there is carbon dating, I guess it was, that people have lived there for 7,000 years, and there's a cultural continuity that you can see, but in the layers of soil. But the thing is that there's stories of the Temagami Anishinaabe, the stories that we have today are stories that are millennia years old from the same place. And that's a pretty mind-boggling concept if you think about it, that the same people were there 6,000, 7,000 years ago that have in their oral tradition how life started on that land base, and how the evolution of the land base itself, really. So anyway, Shushu Smoothwater Lake, for example, is the creation story, which is on the real highlands up here at the mouth of the Sturgeon River. But the film itself is shot down here. So So the biggest thing about the movie that I think is really this idea of always being in search of food, whereas in reality the lands were managed like a big ranch. So and it was left in quarters, and not to say that there weren't bad winters where there would be famine and things like that, or fire would sort of take away one section for productivity for food, but they were able to they had this seasonal rounds, and also then inside those inside a certain area, they would look after the land like in quarters. So they actually controlled beaver stocks, and they also controlled hoofed animals, because they would be able to create feed where they wanted those animals to be.
Right.
And they burned. They did some prescribed burning, like to do that, for example. Like on the so there's this being in place, not nomadic. Moving from place to place inside of a defined area. It's not like just traipsing around. So this whole idea of of Ojibwe people going to the north in search of caribou, I don't think that ever would have happened. And anyway, so that the whole idea about being nomadic, though, that seems to be fixated in people's heads, because it was, instead of realizing that it was a very advanced culture that was actually doing food management and food economy in this area, in a defined area for millennia, not traveling around looking for food. And so it's just it's that sort of a European-based idea that it was all, they were nomads, sort of Stone Age, and but so I'm going to say something. I read a brochure for the Polar Bear Express, and you could go to the James Bay and home of the Cree people. These nomads have traveled this area for 10,000 years. So the Cree people have been there for 10,000 years. That's what they say, and they're nomads. So anyway, I just don't get it. See, there's people all through the land. That's the other thing. You think that when you go outside of your own territory, you're in somebody else's territory, and the protocol was to ask. And that happened a lot. And also, families would bring other families in. So say, my family territory, there was a big fire and it affected what I would have needed for that winter, let's say, or something. And then there would be other people would help. Just what you had to do. You had to help as a larger community, because that's the way it was done, and people together looked after one another. So you probably could move to somebody else's. You would have been asked to move to somebody else's territory, mm-hmm. if you needed it. Mm. So, but there were times of where it was famine, and I think but people didn't die from it. They may have had a hard winter, is what I'm saying. And if somebody did die, they may have been older or something. You know what I'm saying? Like it was always sufferable.
Right.
So in Madeline Katz's book, Moose to Moccasins, she talks about living on the trap line the traditional way. And she talks about living in a wigwam in the wintertime and it being comfortable and smelling nice because of the fresh boughs, the fresh spruce and mm-hmm. that they put down on the floor, and having rabbit skin blankets, and how warm and comfortable that they were, And
that's a lot of rabbits.
Yeah, and so it was a hard life in the sense that it was a very physically involved life, but it was also the idea about it is that it was life, and there wasn't really a separation between living and working, and everything was all just the same thing, right? And the whole notion about the wilderness, right, where it's not been tamed and all totally manicured and fabricated by man, is a scary place. So in European culture, with the they had no bears by then. They haven't had bears for centuries, as far as I know. Wolves, all of these are things to be feared. And not that they're not things to be feared, but they're things to be respected. And and the people have been living with around wolves and around bears forever. And that's their brothers. They learn from the animals, like from the bears. The Anishinaabe people learned medicine, because whatever the bear is going to use, because when he that is good medicine. The bear rooting around, if a bear can eat it, most of the times you can, except for, of course, the carrion kind of things. But they eat a lot of plants, and they eat a lot of roots. Like they look for roots, and so the that's medicine. And the wolves, they have a lot of stories about wolves, in terms of being social animals and being the brother. The wolf is the brother. The dog, that's the dog. I mean, they live with people, right? So there is a
mutual understanding.
There's a coexistence among people. There's coexistence among the people and wildlife in the natural world. And I think that most people, like when they came here, the Europeans had this fear of the woods, going into it, and Three Little Pigs and the Big Bad Wolf. It may have been, I'm not really sure why, but there's a fear of the natural world as being full of, and that, just in the movie you can see how all the animals are vicious, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's about survival. It's about bare minimum surviving the winter, the hunger, the animals. It's very much an unpleasant
existence. It's looking at Indian people. I think really when you start talking about it, like having this dialogue is really good, because you can start to get clarity on what was really going on in that film, right? And if you don't have the dialogue, you can't really have that. But it's so, because just now I thought of this, that we were uncivilized. That's what that is, because we're part of that wildness, part of that having to survive like the rest of the animals, or even having to fight to survive against them, but it's something like that. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but does it? But and then there's the voyeurism of it, and the sort of like it's like, and there's almost some, in some ways it would be almost like a it would almost be like a ghoulish in a way, like look at all this stuff that these guys used to do. Well, that's all, they're not going to do that anymore, so let's capture it. I'm not really sure, but there is a sense of that it's kind of like a
preserving a dying way of
that's
life.
What he says at the very beginning. So I'm sure that what's his name wrote that, whoever the director was.
Well, I don't know if it would have been Burden or
it certainly wasn't the Anishinaabe people didn't write that. And then there's also the way that some of the things that they say about what people were doing. I'm sure that's not all right, but I think the most reliable source we have today, unless there are other sources which I don't know about, but the one I would think would be Madeline Cat, because she did say that it wasn't accurate. I don't know how much of it wasn't accurate from her point of view, but that it wasn't, and it could have been a lot better had they asked them about these things that they're trying to portray. So she felt, obviously, and she was there, that this was an artificial, this was somebody's imagination, and it wasn't reality, even though that some of the things in it are real. Like, that's real Tamagami Bush, that's for sure. and the landforms, and they're still there. You can see them, and so, but a lot of it is not there. And one of the things that people wouldn't understand unless somebody tells them too is how, if it wasn't for the canoe and snowshoes, there never would have been any ability for people to get around in this land.
No.
There was no way that they could have. So,
well, apparently,
that's perfect technology.
Apparently, the one long scene that they did cut was they got elders to build a canoe, a birch canoe, from start to finish. And they showed it in detail, and it was on with the backdrop of the chutes. So it was a beautiful scene, but because it didn't keep the story line moving, they scrapped it. That was their reasoning. But for the people, a scene like that they had the input really on the on what the scene was about, and kind of writing it in a way. It ended up being cut, and how wonderful it would be to actually see that scene, but it's probably doesn't exist anymore.
So Madeline Cat who was 22 in that film, when she I took her to see it on the big screen, and she had never seen it on the big screen. She had seen it a couple of times on television and maybe on a small projector screen, but not on the movie like the big screen for which it was intended. And so we went to it, and she was in her early 90s then, and she was watching it, and she saw herself in the canoe. She says, "Oh, there I am," and it was 70 years since she had seen the movie, and she since that time, I mean, since the movie was being shot, she said, "Oh my God, that was 70 years ago. It seems like such a short time ago, like just a few years." So that was this sort of real, melancholy kind of, or sort of a very deep moment, I thought, for both of us there, or for me it was. And then she said, after watching it, and a number of the people had been on, and towards the end of the film, she said, "I'm the only person still alive out of all of those people." And it made me think, and that really struck me, as being sort of like, at some age, everybody that you've known, that you're contemporary with, are gone, and you're the last person from your whole generation. And that really struck me. So seeing that film with Madeline was a real treat. Like, it was a really beautiful experience. And just for her to imagine that, like to be there and looking at yourself on the big screen, and you hadn't seen the film, and you never did see it on the big screen. And it's 70 years later, you're seeing it for the first time. So
I imagine it would have been quite emotional, not having access to media like we do now.
Well, she could see it, like, she had watched it on TV, she told me, and I think she saw another showing somewhere, a friendship center, wherever, where they would put it on a projector, and one of those, screens, right? The old-fashioned projector screens. She had seen it on that and on television, but it's not the same as going to the big screen. And but just and she hadn't seen it for a long time, never seeing it in a large format, and it was a really great experience for both of us. I think.
Had she written her memoir at that point?
Yes, she had already written that, but she did tell me about, when she said, well, yeah, and I did all the costume things in the book. She did talk about that when we were watching the film, that she had coordinated all the women, all those Anishinaabe women there to create those costumes. And she
Deep inside of me, I'm heading for the door. The life I've known before isn't there anymore. I hear echoes calling me, calling out my name, and it doesn't sound the same anymore. So I see the soldiers lying there till noon. They keep me deep inside my head, hope to see them soon. I can't hear the wilderness, I can't see the wind. Don't have the answer, my friend. I know, and I can only say something deep inside me tells me I'm not dead. I keep on searching, going out of my head. Everywhere is home now, and it just makes no sense. But I know there's got to be another day. Water seeps into my ships, but I keep on going. Lately I'm a wanderer, and lately it started snowing. Too many things go wrong that I don't understand. I don't want to be here anymore. So I walk back to your door once more. Sitting said it all seems wrong, there's nothing here at all. As I sip my morning coffee and stare into the hall, like a little boy, I don't comprehend this rain and this spider.